Let's stay with that story in Iran now, where a police officer has been shot dead and 3 others wounded during a fifth day of anti-government protests. For more, Professor Mohammad Marandi, political analyst at the University of Tehran, joins us now live from Tehran. A very good evening to you, Professor. So, can you tell us what the latest situation is there on the ground over in Tehran?
Well, the city of Tehran is by and large quiet. It hasn't been hit by riots for the last 2-3 days. What initially happened was that early on, a few days ago, there were anti-austerity protests, which do happen now and then in front of parliament. But in this case, it was in the second largest city, Mashhad, and they were complaining about a host of issues, but one of them was about 2 financial institutions that had collapsed and people had lost their money. And among them, there was a small group of people that were more radical. So their grievances were economic, and then there were those who were politically radical. They were chanting slogans against the president, then the leader, then the state. And then we had through social media applications, there were certain groups outside of Iran that were calling on people to protest throughout the country.
Professor, we understand that there's been a crackdown on social media, but the reports that we're getting is that this has been the boldest challenge to the country's citizenship in more than a decade, and there have been widespread protests entering the 5th day of marches. You mentioned the economic concerns, and Iran's unemployment is at 30%. There are concerns that the government isn't quite listening to the protesters and their demands.
Well, I think, again, what I was trying to say was that there are 2 groups of protesters. The first was more economic, and the second was politically radical. And as time went by, those radicals, because they were becoming more and more violent, as I said, those groups that were based abroad were using social media to encourage them to attack police stations, banks, buses and bus stations. And they were also training them online through those social media apps to make Molotov cocktails. And that's the main reason why the government put pressure on, for example, Telegram, which is like WhatsApp, and it's very popular in Iran, was because a number of these groups were being utilized for spreading this sort of message. If you recall, in 2009, when there were riots in London, the Prime Minister in England of the UK said that they may have to shut down social media. But the difference between Iran and the UK is that social media outlets and the companies behind them, they are closely connected with Western governments, so they cooperate. But in the case of Iran, these groups that are based in the West and foreign media applications are not at all cooperating with Iran. Or the police are not cooperating either.
Professor, I understand that the government, as you mentioned, there has been a political twist, and there has been a response from the government. President Rouhani there downplaying the impact of the protests, but this is the first time that we've really seen the protests take a political twist, as you mentioned. Has there been any response yet from Ayatollah Khomeini on this, and can we expect to hear from him on it?
Well, Ayatollah Khomeini hasn't spoken during the last 4 or 5 days, but President Rouhani did speak the night before last, and he was saying that there has to be a distinction made between those who have legitimate grievances and those who are rioting. And the rioters who are on the streets in different cities, he said that what they're doing is unacceptable and that they're destroying public property. So again, we have to make a sharp distinction. What is mostly going on during the last 2-3 days is there are more riots, and the economic protesters have basically left. They're no longer on the streets anymore because they don't want to be associated with these groups. And the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence has stated that the president has said foreign governments are involved, and he named the United States. And the Iranian intelligence said that a terrorist organization, the MEK, is also involved. The MEK was working alongside Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq war, and they also killed many people in bomb attacks and assassination attacks in the 1980s. But now they're based in the West. So the government officials are saying that a lot of the blame has to do with foreign governments, grievances aside, which are legitimate, and the president says people have the right to protest. But the violence that we're seeing, the attack on police stations and so on, this is being instigated from groups that are outside the country, based in Western countries, and social media applications are allowing them to pass on their messages of violence and also training them to produce bombs. That's basically what the thing.
Professor Marandi, before I let you go, I just want to talk about the way the situation is moving forward. We have reports of 20 protesters who've so far been killed. There was, of course, a reported shooting of a police officer as well. Do you see the situation continue to escalate?
Well, some of the people who were killed were not protesters. For example, the protesters hijacked a fire. They took a fire station vehicle, and they pushed it down a hill, and it hit a car, killing the whole family. So some of them were killed. Some people were killed like that, and as you said, police officers were also killed. But during the last 2 days, there has been a decline. And there has been a backlash of sorts as well, because, as I said, those who are expressing economic grievances have basically left the streets. They don't want to be associated with them. And there have also been many demonstrations that are anti-riots that have been taking place across the country, including my own university on campus. A few hundred students the day before yesterday, I think, or the day before that, they protested against the riots. So it is a complicated situation, but I think that things are easing down because many people have different grievances and different opinions. But I think there is a growing consensus that the riots are not in the interest of the country. And the more that Western countries allow these groups to instigate violence in the country, I think the more it's going to hurt Iran-European relations.
Okay, Professor Mohammad Marandi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.